Right. So what we're going to have a look at in this module 8 is working with HTML5 audio tag. So we have worked across different modules. So we started off with basics of what HTML is, right? Then we saw what HTML allows us to do. We talked about CSS, we talked about JS, find the trio. Then we talked about HTML5, which is basically nothing but a latest standard for HTML. Then we went ahead and then specified the different tags that you can work with HTML. So we saw layouting tags, semantic tags, right? Some HTML5 form elements, fine, using input types, okay, which we saw yesterday, saw validations for that. And now in this module, we're going to talk about the multimedia tag, which is basically HTML5 audio, right? So that's what we're going to learn in this session. Now, this course is brought to you by OdinSchool, which is a technology upskilling platform, and we help you continuously to acquire new skills. So stay skilled, stay ahead. Hi, I'm Sumit Vijay Vajpayee. I'm having 14 years of experience in delivering mean, MERN, and full stack technologies, and my other technologies expertise include Angular, React, Vue, GraphQL, Mongo, Node, AI, and machine learning. So, why do we learn audio tag? Why do we have to understand why this audio, or for that matter even video, has to be used in? Now in previous versions, so let's say if you're talking about web, okay, as a part, we didn't had any way of representing the multimedia types. So when we work with yes, we were fine with images and things like that, right? We will give you support for different types of images, so like JPEGs, PNGs, even GIFs, okay, which can be shorter kind of videos in seconds, but it didn't give you any way of playing videos or audios out of the box. Right now, this discussion that we are having would also be valid for the discussion that we'll be going to having tomorrow for video as well, because today we're going to focus on the audio tag and tomorrow's session is basically going to be on the video tag. Now these things, like I'm talking about audio and video, were not out of the box present. So web developers who have wanted to use video and audio on the web for a long time, okay, ever since early 2000s, when we had faster bandwidth, okay, to support any kind of video files, because video files and audio files are larger than the images that we try to create in, right? So in early days, native web technologies such as HTML didn't have any ability to embed video and audio on the web, right? So how do we did that? We did that by using proprietary, or what we also call as plugin based technologies like Flash, and later came Silverlight, right? So we have to go back and install Flash as a plugin, fine, in the browser, and then user would be able to see how do I make use of that Flash as a plugin or a content, okay, which is being shown in the browser. So it was not what browser by default understood, right? But yes, it was written by using some different language. Like for example, if you are using Flash, you use ActionScript, right? And if you're using Silverlight, then you use C# .NET for writing the code, and then that code would be ideally executed into what we call as a sandbox. So sandbox was a part of a browser where browser will not directly play a role in it, fine, but the compilers or the one who understands the Flash, like the Flash plugin, will interpret what is the code in it, okay, and then display the content to you. On the same lines, when we were installing Silverlight, a part of .NET framework was also getting installed onto the client, which was on the machine, and once the Silverlight is installed into the browser and the machine internally, then you had the Silverlight content being shown, right? So that was the dependency. So we used tags like object or embed, fine, for having. So even though we were using Silverlight or we were using Flash, we used object and embed as a tag for embedding it into our HTML page, right? But with the later technology, so these kind of technologies worked, but they had many problems, fine. So they did not work with HTML and CSS features, okay. They had some security issues, accessibility issues, because if you're just playing videos or audios using Flash, then differently abled people will not be able to understand it, because there was not great accessibility features that they provided. And when we use it, so fortunately few years later, okay, once we understood, okay, HTML5 is a specification, which had these features added, which was nothing but audio and video elements to be added using along with some JavaScript APIs for controlling them, right? So you can just go back and make use of this audio and video tag that HTML5 by default gives you, and that's the reason why you should be learning the audio tag. So audio tag with HTML5 gives you the freedom of any dependency, right, that you would have on any third-party plugin or proprietary kind of features which are there for the browser, right? Okay, so working with this audio and video tags, okay, we will be talking about video tags tomorrow as we go ahead, but the thing which you need to understand, yes, HTML5 gives you support for you embedding your audio or video tag into your browser, fine. But before we move on to create any audio tag, because hands-on as a practical case we're going to do it as we have been doing from past sessions, right? But before we do that, we need to understand some things. So what we're going to learn are, we're going to talk about codecs and Mime types, okay, because that's where you need to understand that, okay, what you mean by codec, what you mean. We are not going to go into too much details of codec, but I'll just let you know what codecs are, and from an browser's perspective what this Mime type is, right? So that's what we're going to talk about. Then we'll be checking for the support of audio tags with different browsers, fine, and which browser supports which codecs. I'll be showing you the list of all the browsers in there. So they are again yet evolving, fine, but most of the browsers which are latest one, they give you support for most of the codecs which are there, right? Then we're going to talk about HTML5 audio tag, okay, that's what we're going to create, and we're going to work on the events and the attributes of it. Now when we talk about using what are codecs, right? Now here when we talk about using codecs, what basically these codecs or basically format mean is, here when we talk about making use of any audio or a video tag, right, or any audio or a video file for that matter, right, it understands that it's being embedded or it's encoded in a different way than what we have normal text files, right? So audio and video files are not the same way as we work with text files and other things, because that's something which is being formatted in a different way. So when you talk about making use of codecs or making use of the formats, what they ultimately mean are the format used for encoding these types of audio and video, right? So that's basically the formatting way that's being used for actually putting it into a container tag. Okay, so we have two things, we have container and we have the codec being used in. So if we talk about different extensions, we'll talk about different extensions as well, but there are two entities that you need to understand, that codecs are something that your browser would support or not depending on what version of the browser you're using in, and also the format of format that is used for encoding your audio or a video tag, so or a video file rather. And when I talk about these are having some extensions. So the codecs that we basically say are used to compress audio or a video into manageable files, right? So we can go back and have compression being done. That's what codecs are being used for, because raw audio and video files can be exceedingly large, and that's the reason why we use codecs to actually compress the audio and video tag so that we can have the manageable file size and we can share it across over the internet. So each browser supports and different types of codecs, okay, like Vorbis is there, okay, H.264 is there, okay, which are used to convert compressed audio and video into binary data and back. Okay, so that's what basically these codecs do. So let's understand. So every codec that you see, so if let's say what are codecs, it's a digital electronic device or computer-based software application that aids in compression and decompression of digital audio data, or even for that matter the video data as well, right? Each codec offers its own advantages and drawbacks, right? So each container may have also differ its own positive and negative features affecting the decision which to use in. But as you will see, because internet provides most of the support fine of so you'll see that there are many browsers who are supporting these codecs. That will be something that will not be a problem as we move ahead further in time, right? Now here when we talk about different files, so yes, we will be also talking about what if the browser is not supporting this codec, then what should be done next. So we'll be managing that as well. So here we are only understanding what codecs are. So we understand codecs are nothing but a way and or maybe an electronic device or a computer-based software application that aids in compression, right, and decompression of digital audio. That's what codecs are going to do, and your browsers are supporting these codecs by default. Then what are the MIME types? Find the multipurpose internet mail extension, that's what MIME types stands for. Okay, known as MIME type is a specification extending the format of email to support sending images, audio video files and archives. So when the client and the server share some resources, so when I'm saying resources, you can have an HTML page as a resource, you can have an image as a resource, audio as a resource, some XML file as a resource. Okay, you can have some textual file as a resource. Let's say for example cookies that you're sending in, fine, that is textual file. Then you can even have JSON data being shared across. So all these different formats of the files that you're using in, they are identified by using this MIME type, right, or MIME type as we normally call it. Browsers generally use this MIME type and not the file extension to determine how to process a document, right? So it's basically for the browsers to understand that how do I need to interpret, how do I need to understand what these MIME types are and how do I make use of these MIME types. So when we are going to go back and make use of the audio tags, okay, you need to understand that yes, MIME types is something that we basically go back and also given, okay, by using an attribute called as type, and that's what we'll be working on. So we discussed on two things right now. We talked about codecs and we talked about MIME types, okay, and we'll be using them as we move ahead, using the audio tag as a practical way of representing the text, right? Now when I understand, okay, you have something called as codecs which the browser would support and understand, and we'll talk about different codecs which are there used for compressing the audio and video as a file and which can be shared across over the internet. And if that codec is supported by the browser, the audio file will automatically start playing. Not automatically, until unless the user chooses, the developer chooses to do that. But when the user plays a file, he and the browser supports it, he will be able to hear the audio fine, or maybe see the video as well. Okay, for that matter, as I said, these discussions what we are having is not only restricted only to the audio tag, but we also have a video tag to be discussed on the same lines, right? So maybe I'm going to talk about video tag tomorrow, but yes, these extensions or the codecs or even the MIME types and things which we're discussing are valid for video as well. But let's focus on audio today. And what are the different MIME types which are available? So you can see text plain, fine. Now normally when we talk about using each of this, so I'll just be giving an overview rather than going through each of this. But yes, if I talk about using this text and plain, it means this is basically used for making the browser aware that I'm going to have the response that we're going to receive, which is going to be text and plain. So if I'm returning some HTML and I've just kept the MIME type from the server to be text/plain, right, then the browser will still understand that as a normal text and not interpret that as HTML. If you want that, then you have to go back and make use of text HTML, right? So plain and HTML differs because text/plain are just going to interpret that as a normal text, whereas text/HTML is going to tell the browser that please interpret the things as HTML and not the plain text. Then we have MIME type as images, as you can understand, JPEG, PNG, fine. Then you have audio. So this is what we are going to obviously use. So audio/MPEG, fine. Audio/OGG, okay, which is again an open source, or audio/ any of the other codecs that we will be using. Then you have basically video/MP4 as well, right? We'll be discussing that tomorrow. And then if at all you are sending some data, or you're sending something which is not to be directly taken care by the browser, then you can say application/JSON for transferring your data. So that's basically your MIME type, and you set this as a content type in the headers, and so that this is how the browser will understand, okay, this is the MIME type which I'm using in, right? And then I'll be making use of all of these. So these are different MIME types which browsers use to understand what is the kind of the data which I'm receiving it from the server, and we have the list of all these MIME types available by default, right? Okay, so when we are going to make use of the audio tag, right, we are going to also make use of these MIME types and make use of it into the browser so that we follow the best practices and the browser understands these things as well, right? So let's go back and implement. Okay, so before we do that, let's have a look at the audio codec format supported as well, because uh, once we finish up with the things, then we'll start off with the hands-on. So the audio codec formats supported by different browsers are these. Now you will find you have this format, fine, you have the container, okay, which is basically the extension normally that we talk about, right? And then you have the MIME type, right, which you can use for playing it. So this format, okay, like the PCM, fine, the container is WAV, okay, or MP3, the container is MP3 as well, fine. So ACC, Vorbis, which is again open source, fine. So you can see OGG and WebM are basically the container of it. So these are formats, okay, that are that your browser can understand, and these are basically used to compress and convert some form into the binary form, and again into some format by using some of the softwares that Codex provides you. Okay? So your browser is capable of supporting these, and we will see which browser supports what. So as you can see, Chrome is the forefront runner of supporting most of the features, well, as is Edge as well, not a problem. But IE is where it differs. So you can see, yes, it supports MP3 from IE9 and above. Yes, it supports MP4. Okay, from that perspective as well. So the MIME type is audio. You can also have videos. We'll talk about that tomorrow, as I said. Then Edge has the support for it. Fine, even Firefox, Opera, fine, Safari is having support for it. Now you can see for WebM, fine, OGG, okay, with WebM again, Opus as a format. Okay, that's not being supported by Safari, but they are still working onto it. Okay, so right now that's not a support, but yes, there may be some support as this is still in the process. So that's how the table is going to show you what all things are the formats supported by different browsers. Now these are changing when you're seeing this at this time of recording. You may have a different table when you're seeing it live as a part, because it's constantly evolving, right? So different browsers may support different features. So maybe if you go 2 months forward from here, if you're seeing this video after 2 months or 6 months, maybe then Safari would also be giving you the support for the WebMM OGG. So these are the different codecs, fine, which are available, and I'm not going into too much details of what codecs are, what these formats are, how do you do that, because it requires completely different skill set for doing it. So let's say if we are having our file, okay, which is our HTML file, which is going to make use of and video form, and if we do, okay, this is the format that it is following and this is the extension, we just need to look out for the support for it, okay, into the browser, and if it does, then surely we are happy to make use of it. So let's see, how do we make use of the audio tag, right? So let's come back to our Visual Studio Code, and in this module 8, which I've created as a folder, I would just be creating a simple audio tag.html, right? So I'm going to have my HTML page to be created, and then I am going to have, now there are different ways to also check if your HTML is supporting audio tag or not. So I'll just going to have an h1 tag, and here I'm going to say HTML5 audio. Now in this, as I said, the simplest way that you can go back and use an audio tag is by just saying the audio tag, right? Now here, any fallback content that you want to show, you want to show an image, you want to show a text. Let's say if I type something like this will be rendered if browser doesn't support audio tag. right? So what we did is we are just creating this audio tag, right? And this, anything that goes within this audio tag is going to be rendered if at all audio tag is not supported by the browsers. If I just right click and do open with my live server, right, I don't have anything to be shown, right? But you don't see that message. Now why don't you see that message? Because you already have this HTML5 being audio tag being supported by the browser, which is your Chrome. Okay? And that's the reason why we do not see this. So that's a very simplest test of whether the audio tag is supported or not. Now there are JavaScript ways as well by using create element, but because we don't know about JavaScript as of now, we'll not be talking much on to that end. Now the second way is to create by saying, let's say audio, and then provide the source for it, right? So here I may be going back and using some source files for playing it around. Now there are two things to it. So when we talk about making use of the audio and the video tags, so here when I am providing any source, there are two ways in which I can go ahead and do that. The first way is using a file, fine, and which already exists. So let's say there's some MP3 file or an .ogg file that is present in, and if that is present, then we already have a support for these things being there in HTML5. But there's also support for streaming, for live streaming, fine. So we'll discuss on both of these two things as we move ahead. But let's talk about, so I was going back the download section where we have this MP3 file. So I've just downloaded the MP3 file. I'm going to paste it into my module 8 folder, and in this module 8 I'm just going to paste some file that's there. Now here I'm just going to go back and check whether the file is being playing around or not. So you can see, right, that's the file. Now if I just rename, I'm just going to take this as, let's say, sample.mp3. okay, now how do I play? Not with a normal player, but I want to play it into the web, okay, which is my HTML page. So this audio tag will help you to do that. So when I say audio source and give it a name, sample, closes around, complete, it's outside of it, that's a duplication. So in the source, I'm just going to go back and have sample.mp3 being used around. Now if I just view this into the browser right now, fine, so now module 8 as a folder contains these two items. I do not see anything in here. If I right click and go back to inspect, right, and if I just zoom into the body section, fine, you can see the audio tag, right, with source sample.mp3 being presented, fine. Okay, now here when I say, okay, audio tag is there into my browser, but I'm still not able to hear it. Now the reason behind it is either you have to set the autoplay as true so that the audio can start immediately, or you can just show the controls. Now this is a boolean valid attribute that audio provides you, and in this boolean valid attribute we do get a simple way how browser is going to represent this HTML audio tag for it. Now if you go back into your browser, that's how the audio tag looks like, fine. Now here if I want to play this, it's my choice to have things being played. I can pause, fine. I can go back and mute, fine. So while things are playing, because it is muted, cannot, right. You can even go back and download. Okay, that's again a new feature with the latest browsers that you get, when you can download the MP3 files. Now this is what the default behavior, fine, which you get if you're talking about the HTML5 audio tag that your browser by default gives you. So you can see the endpoint, okay, 0.27, or the starting point as 00, and how much amount of time it has progressed, that also you can see. Now why is this happening? Because you have a file, and what your browser did as it has downloaded the file from the server, and now it has started playing it. right? So that's how the first part. Okay, so we are talking about, yes, this is an .mp3 file, and in the .mp3 file I am having the codec being supported by the browser. And because the reason why I say this is because when I click on the play button, okay, it's capable of displaying me capable of displaying me the number of seconds that it has gone in, and I'm able to hear it. That's the way that your browser is going to display the things, which is Chrome. But if I just copy this audio tag and go back to different browsers, let's say if I just go back and placed in here, so here you see the difference that it makes. So I'm into Mozilla Firefox, find the latest version of it, and this is how Mozilla Firefox displays it. So you can see the browsers in which the audio tag is displayed is different. Okay. Let's check it out for Edge as well. So this is Edge, paste, hit enter, and you would see Edge is kind of using the same way how the Chrome was. Fine. So if I play in here, that's how the things work. So again, increase the volume, decrease the volume. Fine, you can even click on this, try to mute it, and that's how your audio tag works out of the box. Fine, by using HTML5. Now, this is okay that we are having this controls and the source tag basically being shown in. Now, if that is the case, then how would I have now you said I have a support for mp3 with Chrome, and that's fine, and that's why it's be able to play it. But what if we do not have support for, let's say, this mp3 file? Let's say there is some file of an OGG extension that you are giving in. Now if the browser does not support the OGG, as we have seen with Safari, let's say, then there must be some fallback mechanism. There must be something that your browser support, fine, which may be a different codec altogether. And that's the reason why, rather than we going back and specifying this source in here, right, it's a better way to go back inside the audio tag and have a source tag being present here. And in this source tag, I can mention, so we'll see the advantage of using this source over the other, fine, rather than just specifying source equal to one single .mp3 file. Now let's say, for example, I have a sample dot, for example, this is OGG. Now I don't have an extension of it, fine, but let's say I'm having a sample.ogg file, and the type that I'm going to mention, which is the Mime type, and that's going to be, let's say, audio/OGG. Fine. By specifying this in the source, your browser is going to understand that, okay, this is the Mime type of it, and I can support this or not. So here also I'm going to say audio/mp3. Now let's go back. Now let me also have another extension, okay, which is, let's say, WebM. Okay, even though that's not something that is there, okay, but yes, let's say, for example, we are having audio/WebM as an extension. So even though the file does not exist, now what your browser is going to do, the advantage of having multiple source tags is, if your browser fails to load or to run this OGG, it will look out for the second one. That's a fallback mechanism. If it fails to run this one, it will load the third one, and we'll check if that is supported. So now if I just come back into my UI, fine, which is Chrome, and if I just refresh here, now you will find onto your console, you can see sample.og. Oh, I need to have that file, so I'll just rename this extension. So I'm going to have in module 8 reveal, because if the file is not found, then that's not going to be there. I'm just going to go back, paste, I'm just going to extend it with the extension OGG, but that's not going to play it because that's a different thing altogether. And let's say also have the same thing. I'm going to copy that, paste, and I'm going to have the same sample dot webm. Yes. Now here, now because Chrome supports this, the reason why am I going back and just renaming, copying and renaming that is because Chrome supports these formats. So even if I have physical files with extension OGG and with extension WebM, Chrome will still play it. So I would not prove my point that if the browser is not supporting it, then maybe something else can be done. So here, if you have a look at, I'm just going to refresh my page, right? And if I go back to the network, so let's refresh, empty cache and hard reload, right? Now here, if I start playing, right, you see that these extensions that you are talking about, let's say for example, I'm going to give any of the files. So let's say this is sample.ogg, find that it is basically playing in. Now, which your Chrome supports, right? Now, if suppose I give something as XYZ, fine, just to give an thing of it, okay, audio sample as XYZ, and if this OGG is what I rename this to, let's say XYZ, fine, let's see if that is something what it supports. So if I just refresh, fine, so I'll just hardcode load and refresh. Now if I click onto it, fine, now it's loading sample.xyz, but because it understood the media as audio/OGG, it is still playing it, right? So not the extension plays a role, but yes, this plays a role, understanding that XYZ is, even though the extension of it, but still the MIME type OGG is supported, and that's why that is the case that it is trying to play a point, right? So if I go back into this and then copy it, put it into, let's say IE, one, because other browsers are also supporting it. If I just go back and press into IE, this is IE11, hit enter, right? I will find IE is not able to play that because it's finding that it's having some invalid source. But if at all I just have these extensions final instead of OGG, if I go back and make use of, let's say MP3, okay, for that matter, let's come back into IE. Now you can see IE giving a support for MP3. Right? So that's how your fallback thing would work in. So if I go back, so how is IE able to play this? Because IE is not supporting the OGG, IE is not even supporting WebM, but it supports MP3. So if you have a look at what we had looked at previously, so go back to the previous slide, right? So you can see that IE is having a support for audio MPEG as well as the MP3 as a container extension for it. So that's how you can basically go back and make use of it. Okay, so here MPEG and MP3 as kind of same things that you are giving in here. You can even use MPEG, which is the container basically. That's an MP3 is an extension. Audio for MPEG is basically container and the codec that you're. Fine. So this is the fallback mechanism. Right. Now, if suppose I want to go back and have other things to be displayed. Let's say I'm using controls, fine, to display all the controls which are there. But what if I want to autoplay? So with this, now I can choose not to have controls, but let's say autoplay as an boolean valid attribute. And if I just come back to your browser, if I just refresh, you will see immediately it starts loading. Fine, so that's your autoplay. So I may not want to have autoplay by default, so I'll just say controls. Fine, you may want to go back and use autoplays as well, but you also have events, fine, associated with it. Now if at all you're wanting to have events and the attributes being used, so like controls is one, autoplay is one, as I've told you. Now here you can go back and have some events being trapped or even the methods being called. We'll talk about the different methods as well, but let's say I am handing an event, let's say on pause, and I'm going to have a simple alert message which is going to tell you that music paused. Right? So that's going to be the alert message whenever I go back and pause my music. If I play, and you can see music paused is an alert message which I basically get in, right? Okay, so here when I'm working with my on pause, on play, finds all these are different events which are there. On volume changed, so these are all the different events that you get in. So to list down, you can see on volume change, fine, on play, fine, on pause we have already seen. So these are different events which are associated with your audio tag, right? Now you may also want to create a audio tag of your own. So you may not want to have the HTML5 default renderer that the browser is trying to use in. So you may choose to, let's say, create and have your own audio player to be used in, and which is perfectly fine, which is possible. Okay, so you have been given methods, you have been given events, okay, for performing that action, and you can go back and do it. Okay. So if you want that to be done, fine, it can be done using normal button, normal tags which are there, but let me just put it from a way that you can understand how you can use some styling onto it as well. Okay? You can do it without styling, fine, but if you want to style it, okay, you can use some styling as well. So let's see how to use it without styling. And in this, I'm going to have another h1 tag which basically says, or maybe I can have this out, and I'm just going to have my audio tag to be commented, and let's have a different audio tag to contain. Now it's not going to have source, right? Or if you want, you can do that. Let's use source because we don't have different extensions to be mapped in now. So let's use the source directly to present our sample.mp3 file. Okay, you can also give the type in here as well. Okay, that's which is not a problem. But if I do something like this, and as we saw, if controls is not present, then this is not going to render anything into the UI. Fine. So you would see it's not displaying anything into the UI. And because it's not displaying anything in UI, I may want to display some controls, fine, instead of the browser controls being shown in. And how do you do that? I can do it by using buttons simply. So I can go back and have button, fine, as a tag. So you have the button tag. Now the reason why I'm using button tag is I'll be using some styling for doing something as well. But let's say, for example, I just want to have a simple text which is button play, and onto the click of it, what I want this audio tag to actually play. Fine. So I can give an ID to it. Right now, this is more of a dynamicism, right? Because you're wanting user interaction to kick in. So a bit of JavaScript, not very in detail, but a bit of it which can add some dynamicism onto it. Okay. So let's say the audio control, and this audio control is what I'm going to go back and have a method called as play. So on the click of it, right, I'm just going to go back and have my audio to be played around by just saying audio control or audio player for that matter. Use player, better choice, and this audio player dot play is the method that you can use for playing the audio. Right now, obviously, there is no choice of pausing it. So if you want to pause, you can also do that. But before we do that, let's have a look at very simplest way of using some icons. So rather than just having text, okay, we can use icons for styling something into the UI. And for that, we use a library, and that library is called as Bootstrap. Now there can be a dedicated session specifically on Bootstrap. I'm not doing that. I'm just searching for this Bootstrap as, and I'll just tell you an overview of what Bootstrap is and what it is used for, so we can understand Bootstrap as a simple styling library. Yes, it calls itself as a framework because it gives you some components to be used in and some reusable entities, widgets and all to be used in. But for us, Bootstrap is, for us right now, it's only going to be used for styling purposes. So if I just go back to Bootstrap, right, and if I just click on to the link, which is the bootstrap.com, so it'll say build fast responsive sites with Bootstrap, right? And you can use it, you can either download, fine, or you can refer to the online version, which is the CDN version. Now what we need to have for this is, so we'll be working with the 3.4.x version. There is a reason why I'm doing it. because if you go back to the CSS, you can see if at all you want to create buttons, right? You can create buttons by using some default classes that Bootstrap gives you. So here, if I work with buttons, and if I use a class called as btn space btn-default, right? Now this class is something that having some styling by default. So you can see, so this is my default button. Okay, when I hover the mouse, you can see the rounded borders. See how HTML is displaying our normal button like this, fine. Whereas the Bootstrap button, like these ones, can have the textual, the contextual color as well. Primary, success, info, warning, danger, fine. All these things can also be used. So where are these classes defined? These classes are defined in the Bootstrap, and there is a dedicated CSS file associated with it, and that's what I'm going to search. So I'm going to search for Bootstrap CDN. You just need to follow the steps. Don't worry too much about what Bootstrap is. We are using it for styling purposes. I'm going back to the cdnjs.com. The reason why I refer to the cdnjs.com is it applies, or it gives me the flexibility to choose different versions of it. I'm going to say 3.4.1 because I'm going to use Glyphicorns, and with the latest version for Glyphicorns, I have to do some extra step which I don't want to do, and that's the reason why I'm just using this 3.4.1. Now you can even go back and just see what files are there, out of which we are not interested in the min.js or js files. We are just interested in this CSS file, which is the style sheet file. And if I just copy the tag, I'm going to go back and put it into the head section. Now I told you head section is something which allows you to have some metadata information about the page, and referring to a style sheet which contains some styles by default is a part of it. So we'll go back to the CSS. We'll talk more on this style sheet as well, right? Right now I'm just referring the Bootstrap, and I'm going to make use of it. Now how do you make use of it? I can just go back and make use of some default classes. Like I can go back and say class equal to btn-primary, and if the import of Bootstrap has happened successfully, my document should be showing me a primary colored button, right? So if I show in a different file so that things are centered, so that's how my button looks like, right? If I give a different context altogether, so let's say this is success, fine, that's how my Bootstrap button looks like. Now I'm not much interested in the different types of classes, but yes, what I want to tell you is here, because you're making your own audio tag, you may want your URL to be visible in a better way, and that's the reason why you can go back and make use of what we call as Glyphicorns, right? So if you go back to Bootstrap, where you can search for components, so you can search for Glyphicorns. Sorry for that. Yeah. So Glyphicorns, and you can see, you click on the Glyphicorns, that's the part of what Glyphicorns are. So Glyphicorns are glyphs which are available for free if you are using Bootstrap 3.x. Fine, over 250 glyphs of the font format from the Glyphicon halflinks are available. Okay, but if you're not using Bootstrap, then they are kind of paid, right? But I can quickly go back and search. I'll just be searching for a play, and you can see there are different icons. Fine, so this is a play circle. Then you can even have this normal play. So I'm going to use this as a class, and I'm going to apply it to a span tag. Now you understand what a span tag is, and that's the reason why you're using a button tag. I'm not using input type equal to button because I cannot have a span content inside it. So for complex HTML, we use the button tag, and because there is no form, there is no submission of the form as an part of it. So it doesn't matter even if it is input type equal to submit. So this is your Bootstrap, and let's see how does our UI look like. So I closed it. I'll open it with live server, and if you see around, that's your play button. Right. So on the same lines, you have different methods. I'm just going to copy and paste it just for you to understand and give a look and feel for it. So maybe this is pause as well. That's another method. Only I can, yes, it's pause, and here I'm going to use again pause, so that we have two buttons being displayed, right? Play and the pause, and then I would have things to be played in. Let's again resume. You have paused. Right, so that's how you can create your there are different tags. So let's say, for example, if you want to have things from a volume perspective, so on the click of it, what I want is, I don't want volume I don't have volume as a method, but I have volume as a property. So I would just say volume, fine, to be plus equal to, and I'll be increasing it, let's say, by 1. So 0 to 1 is the maximum value that you can give in of a volume. And here, if the volume has to be increased, I may be using a different Glyphicon altogether. And let's say search for figure. Yes, so you can see you have the volume down, volume up. So I'm going to use volume up, and here I'm going to paste that Glyphicon. I'm just going to paste my Glyphicon to have my volume up as a value being. On the same lines, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to decrease the volume. I'm going to put back. I'm going to have -1 onto it, and hopefully that is volume down. This down, and let's check if it is down or not. Yes, so it's volume down. You can also have volume off, so you can say volume is equal to 0 for that matter. But let's have a look at how does my UI look like. So if I'm just opening up with live server, these, and that's my HTML audio tag. That's how the things look like. So when you talk about using your audio tag, but now you can have a number of other things being also played in. So here I can go back and have this volume to be changed around. If you're not wanting user to go back and make use of the volume increase or decrease button, can even now also along with volume, let me also tell you that you have a way of supporting let's say playback rate, right? How? So currently when our UI is being played around, it's a normal rate at which the UI is playing. So if I just play, right, so you can understand, okay, this is a normal play rate that's being happening in. Now I may choose to go back and even change this rate. So let's do a simple example, okay, where we'll understand this. And for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a select. So this select is like a drop down list, fine, which is again a form control, and this drop down list will allow me to give you some options of playing back your things in a different speed. So it can be half speed, it can be in a slow motion, that's what I'm saying with a half speed, or it can be fast, and that's what I can do. So with this ID I can just use, let's say, speed selector, and with the selector in the option, fine, because that's an tag that you use in the select, okay, for different options being dropping down, fine. And with this option I give a value. Let's say the value is 0.5, then I have 0.75, say, then or 0.75 here. Then I may use another option to be pasted in, and let's say this is a normal speed, which is value 1. I would say normal. Maybe I'll just speed it up by just saying twice the fast of it. Okay. Or even I can just get back this 7.5, and here I make slow-mo. So these are the values which are there basically for what we call as the playback, okay, the playback rate. Now when I'm choosing this, how do you understand that what the user is selecting? Because if I see this into the UI, right now, yes, this is normal drop down list that kicks in, but it's not going to affect anything as of now because I'm not affecting my audio tag, right? So if that has to be there, what needs to be done is I need to handle an event, and I'm going to handle an event called as on change because it's all dynamicism, and I want my audio player, fine, so I'll say my audio player dot what we call as a playback rate. So playback rate, and that playback rate is equal to this dot value. Please make sure that you write playback rate in a correct manner, and as we saw with HTML form yesterday as well, this is going to correspond to the current object or the current element, which is this select, and it's going to give you the value out of it, and that's why we have used the value property for it. So audio player dot playback rate is equal to this dot value, and I'm going to select the value that's going to be there. So let's see how does this work. So if I go back into my UI, if I just refresh, if I play, right now, you may go back and say fast. Can you see the difference? And if I just slow-mo, right? Now you may even want normal to be selected at first, so you can give a boolean valued attribute as select. So when the page refreshes, you can see by default it is normal, right? Because when select is, if you don't use this, by default the drop down list, okay, which is the select tag, displays you the first item. Okay. Yes, it may also be an option that you can have a different option saying here that please select something, fine, which is there, but I don't want to go into that, but we can just go back and say selected, so that always normal is the way for the music to be played in. So when I play, that's what is selected, but I can choose to have it in a slow-mo, or just the twice speed of it. That back to normal. Right, so that's how you can build your own. Now obviously with styling you can have more styling going into it. Right now I've not used any styling from the audio player perspective, but I've just used simple buttons, and we have made our audio player to be having some audio being played in, to have some icons and present it in a better way. We have also seen some methods and events of audio tag, okay, which can basically allow you to handle these events, fine, and also the playback rate, which can basically be changed, right? So we can change the volume from 0 to 1, we can change the playback rate from 0 to 1, or even the twice of it if that's the fast thing what you're expecting. So all these things are actually expected. So there is no stop method actually by default, but you can implement it by saying stop and reassigning the source to the original value. So you can just pause the video or pause the audio, okay, and you can again refresh or you can have the audio player dot source is equal to again audio dot source, so it will be reassigned to it and we'll be starting it from the scratch. That's how the stop is going to basically work. Now you don't have stop as a method by default present. So these are the events, these are the methods, okay, which are available. But here I understand that we have used all these different input types like button, okay, that we have used for working of controls of your audio tag. But what if this audio tag, which is currently using a static file, as you can see, if I just go back into inspect, just show you that, and into the network area, I empty the cache and hard reload. Right? Now can you see, just forget about this favy icon, because I'll just go back and have this to be ignored off, fine. And if I say like I do not want to have things to be specified, let's say I'm saying okay, bootstrap.css is what is referred, sample.mp3 is what is being referred because that's the source, and then you have some fonts. You can see this Glyphicorns, halflings and all this is basically font. So I do have this mp3 file being downloaded. Now the player can go back and play, right? So it's a physical file which is actually downloaded from the server back to the client, right? And here, this now can you see the content type is audio / MPEG. Fine, that's the content type which is being set because that's the default codec for the MP3 that we are file that we are trying to use in, and that's the MIME type that we were talking about. So this sample.mp3 is something that the browser understands and it is downloaded, and now we are able to play it. Yes, that's fine. But what if I don't have something which is an ready file? I have something called as streaming. Now, as we know, for live streaming, if I say I'm going back and making use of live streaming, we understand live streaming does not have preset of things being stored in like your physical file. Fine, so there is no end file to it. Until unless your stream source ends, live streaming will not end. And live streaming is a continuous process, meaning if your client, right, is going back to the server, bringing back the response, fine. Now when the browser understands that there is going to be an audio tag which is referring to a stream location, fine, then always the server will be sending some chunks because everything cannot be sent at once from the server back to the client. So streaming has to have some chunks and your tag has to support it. Now HTML5, for that matter, HTML5 audio tag supports live streaming. Fine, so you can go back and have a URL that's being live streamed and refer it into the source, and that will be working. And we're going to have a look at it right now. Okay, so the practical use of live streaming, we can go back and use it. Now you can use any stream, okay, that's there, but I'm going to use a sample stream that's already available for me to use in. And if you want to search in, I've already searched. I will show you the URL that exists in there for doing that. So if you go back into this, you can go back to wpr.org, okay, and say listen smart speakers, direct system streams, internet radio. You can search for listen with smart speakers with the direct streams, and this is the URL, fine, which I'm going to copy because that's a live stream URL, and I'm going to copy this URL, go back to my UI, have a horizontal rule which gives me a line, and I'm going to have my audio tag being created and the source being mentioned as this URL that we are having. Right now you can go into deep, you can understand, okay, it is MP3, so maybe type you can give it as audio / MPEG and things like that, right? But right now that's my source which I have given, and if I just save, I'll just enable the controls. If I come back, why? Right here, I need to specify of controls, and because this is live streaming, I need to specify the type. So I would say type equal to audio / MPEG, so that you understand the MIME type, because that's a streaming. So let's save and come back into the UI. Okay, this source is not supporting. Let's source tag. Right, so let's have the source. Into the source, I'm going to paste source file for it to check now. Once again, back. Let's try with a different URL. Maybe the URL is kind of offline. I'm not sure if that is. Because that's US based radio station, so I'm not very sure if I'm following the I think there is no stream from it, so I think we may be using a different URL. So because I checked it beforehand, this URL worked in, but I think there is no streaming associated with it, and that's the reason why we are not able to see the things onto it. So let's search for any other stream that's there. I think we don't have any streaming going on right now, and that's the reason why we're not able to see this. Let's just change it to something else. We need to have some stream from it.
Support for WPR comes from Sitka Salmon Shares,
So now you can
a
see
community-supported
there was
fishery
a
home
problem with the
delivering
URL.
traceable wild Alaskan seafood. More about their small boat fleet at sitkasalmonshares.com/WPR.
I guess you're able to hear the voice.
It is
because
the
now this is
unnoticed
coming
yet
from-
essential elements of our cities: cell towers, emergency
Now, the
exits,
thing which I
bike
want to tell you
lanes,
here
and
is-
bubblers or drinking fountains, if you
Right-click,
prefer.
go back to
Now
inspect.
out of use and festooned with caution tape amid COVID, you know him as the creator and
Have a
host
look
of the
at it.
99%
If I just go back to the
Invisible
network,
podcast. Roman Mars is spending
the
the hour
difference
with
that you
us
will
on the morning
find,
show.
I'm
I'm
just
Kate
refreshing
Archer-Kent.
empty cache and hard reload. Now observe the change in sample.mp3, find and this. Now you would see when I'm playing,
Of everyday design that is inspired by the podcast he launched a decade ago. He was chatting with his local public radio station KQED in the
Shift
Bay
down, back to the
Area
client.
recently.
Right, so
Are
that's-
you
that's
curious
something just
about
transferred
curb
over
cuts, driveways, or roundabouts?
the network.
What do you want to know about something in your city and how it's designed?
right? So we are making use of this stream. So earlier the problem was with the URL because I think that radio station was off and this is on, so this URL is working fine, and we saw that my HTML does support streaming as well, right? So here we discussed on HTML5 fine audio tag that is used now out of the box without using Flash or Silverlight, right? Then we had Codex and Mime types to support different browsers, supporting different extensions and the codecs and the containers of it. And we also saw the list of the browsers supporting the codecs. We also saw the fallback mechanism that can be used in, right? So we changed the extension to XYZ, but because the codec was kind of understood and supported, when your browser went ahead and did that. And in Internet Explorer, where it was not supporting any of these, then it said invalid input. And the moment we changed it to MP3, because that's where you had the support for Internet Explorer also played MP3 file, so that's a fallback mechanism. So source allows you to give different extensions, different codecs, okay, and the formats for every browser, so that you don't have to check in for each browser whether it supports or not, and you can have the listing of all the different extensions and the codecs that you're having in of the files, so that if the browser supports it, it will be playing at that directly. If not, you'll be looking for the next better option that it is able to do. Right, so we also talked about the events and attributes, like you can work with play, pause, okay, as the methods. Then you can even handle on play, on pause as an event. And playback rate, okay, is the property that we discussed on. Controls, fine, we discussed on. Autoplay, we discussed on, and then the volume to be changed in. Fine. So that was about HTML5 audio tag. So thank you all. Please do not forget to like and subscribe our channel. Fine. If you have any comments, do let us know in the comments box. Thank you. See you tomorrow at 5:30.